Hello, and thank you all for joining. Today is January 7th, 2022. My name is Gabriella Licari. I am the CEO of New Beginnings, and today we are going to be giving a presentation on New Beginnings relocation. A little bit about New Beginnings. The company is an up-and-coming business in Florida as the home state. They're thinking of expanding and building a headquarters, and so really want to decide where the best location is for the new headquarters. New Beginnings sells merchandise for families, and when we're talking about families, we're talking about young children, infants, babies, toddlers, and that merchandise ranges from clothing to developmental toys, interactive toys, so really a diverse market there. Now, before we get into the meaty part of the presentation, I do have a video I'd like us to watch. This is a little bit of a motivation when heading into the discussion. So let's go ahead and watch that now. Perfect. So when looking at that and listening to Elon Musk talk about business, you listen to the major parts of what he said, which is talking about growth for a business. And sometimes that can mean moving. It can mean bringing in outside resources or new ideas and innovation. And that's what I want to bring to the forefront of this presentation when we're talking about this, is thinking about the potential for growth and opportunities rather than what may hinder a relocation. And starting off, I want to talk more about the relocation and the purpose behind it. So really we're trying to determine if the headquarters for New Beginnings needs to be either in Texas or Florida, whichever is the best option for the company. Now, Texas was chosen as the other state to compare to due to the alleged large number of families and familial growth within the state. Of course, New Beginnings is catering to new families, babies, toddlers, infants, young children again. So really that's the target market of what we're looking for. It's going to be a major component as to where the company wants to set base and what will be best for the future. And so choosing the right location, again, will be essential for their growth and the competitiveness compared to other companies like it. Now, research that was done to support this, a lot of helpful resources. Some of the most helpful resources, one would be the Federation of Tax Administrators. When we get into the first criterion, which is talking about state sales tax, it was a great resource. The second criterion, population under 18 years old, the greatest resource that helped with that research was the U.S. Census Bureau. And all of this research was conducted in January of 2022. And we'll be comparing and contrasting 3 total criteria between Texas and Florida, 2 of which you've just heard, one being state sales tax rate, second being the population of those under 18 years old, and the third being the fertility rate in either state. Now, the first criterion, state sales tax. Of course, like all businesses, New Beginnings is subject to state sales tax on each purchase of their merchandise, regardless if that was online or in store. So it's going to be essential that whichever state has a lower sales tax, it's going to be the more preferred location for their headquarters, as a lower state sales tax means potentially larger profits, lower prices, so more customer appeal there. In Texas, the state sales tax rate is 6.25% compared to Florida, which has a state sales tax rate of 6%. So Florida is the more preferred option in this criterion, as it does outperform Texas by 0.25%. And again, leading to higher profits potentially and more customer appeal. Now, the second criterion is the population of those under 18 years old in each state. Again, getting back to the target market, this is specific to New Beginnings as it's attracting minors and specifically, again, young children, toddlers, teenagers, babies. But they are all under 18 years old, which this criterion is evaluating. So a larger population of minors is going to be a more suitable location, make it easier transition for having an existing consumer base in either state. Now in Texas, the population under 18 is 25.5% of the total population, whereas in Florida it is 19.7%. So really, Texas is the more preferred category. It does outperform Florida by 5.8% in this criteria. So we're going to say that Texas is the most preferred state when it comes to this criterion and potentially relocating and putting the headquarters. The last criterion we're going to evaluate is the fertility rate. And so the target market, those toddlers, babies, minors, they depend on new births for growth when it comes to new beginnings merchandise. So the higher chance that there's going to be new births and more growth for the market, the better it's going to be long term for new beginnings. It's going to be more suitable to have a higher fertility rate in either state. So when looking, Texas does have a fertility rate of 62.5%, whereas Florida has a fertility rate of 56.6%. So you see here that Texas does outperform Florida by 5.9% in this criterion, and is the preferred state when you come to think about the future growth and the potential for the future market or of new beginnings. Now, looking at this next slide here, I have a graph that I've created to show physically the difference between that fertility rate between Texas and Florida. You can see here we have two different years. We have 2017 and 2019. In both years, Texas does outperform Florida. So even though the growth has changed and declined in both states, Texas has been continually outperforming Florida in this criterion. Ultimately, the conclusion here is that the lower state sales tax in Florida is preferred over Texas. The greater population of those under 18, the minors in Texas, is outperforming and preferred compared to Florida, along with that greater fertility rate. So overall, Texas outperforms Florida in 2 out of the 3 categories and criteria when compared to just staying in Florida. And that leads us to our recommendations. So as mentioned, Texas does outperform Florida in the majority of categories and criteria, meaning that Texas would be the recommended location for the new headquarters for New Beginnings. Again, we can review that the 0.25% difference in sales tax, while important, is a minor change and is pretty similar when compared to other states. And it will be easy to accommodate this change as you have higher growth rates and a higher consumer base and sales market in Texas when compared to Florida. Again, that's leading back to the higher population of minors by 5.8% and the higher fertility rate of 5.9%. So really focusing on Texas as the preferred recommendation here. Expanded consumer base right off the bat, larger potential for transition, more customer appeal, and more future long-term growth potential than Florida. Secondly here, talking about recommendations is social media. So you want to have a strong slogan to go ahead and introduce this idea to bring it to the new market in Texas. The recommended slogan is going to be at the start of all new beginnings. Again, reinforcing new beginnings, new families, new starts, new beginnings as a company and their merchandise. Now here we have listed a bunch of references, so you can definitely access those and refer to them if you have any more questions or want to take a deeper look at the data. Now before I take any questions, I want to show of hands if anybody believed that Florida would be the most preferred location. So those of you who thought before we got into the presentation that Florida would be the most preferred location, go ahead and raise your hands. Okay, yeah, so I do see that most of you believed that Florida would be the more preferred location. And let me ask a volunteer here, if someone would volunteer and say why they would think that Florida would be better. That Florida would be better because of all of the grandparents that are located here. That's a great point. However, according to the data that we've researched, it doesn't appear that way. Again, we're leading back to new births, not legacy or family extended purchases. We want to focus on current, immediate consumers. Does anybody have any questions for me before we move on from this part of the presentation? Yes. So the question is, would there be a large concern for New Beginnings relocating and potentially leaving all of their consumers behind, consumers upset about the relocation process and choosing not to purchase from them? That is a great question. That's a kind of a two-part question, so I'll answer that. The answer to the question would be that there's a larger potential market in Texas compared to Florida already, a larger number of minors and families, and as such, I don't think it would be a concern to find new customers when moving, so I don't believe that that will be a concern. And as far as consumers not wanting or not appreciating the relocation and not continuing to purchase from New Beginnings in the future, again, we have that potential for future growth with a higher fertility rate and higher potential births and new customers that can come from Texas versus Florida. A larger rate of growth, I believe, will overshadow that concern. Thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day.